So, folks, one thing we really need to see happen more and more are people who have an intimate relationship with old Donnie, both politically and personally, take the step and speak out against him. And above all, those people need to be conservatives, especially those that know him well and come from spaces like religion and stuff like that. Because we need to see those people finally own up to how Donald Trump's rhetoric is dangerous and hateful and against everything that supposed Christians out in the world actually accept. So what I have for you is very fascinating. Hit the like and subscribe button. It really helps me out because I have a mixture, a broad spectrum of liberals, of conservatives, and of Christians standing up to Donald Trump. So much so that Donald Trump has been booted from a church today on Sunday by one of these top evangelical conservative religious figures who heard a disgusting Trump speech, interrupted it, and gave him a boot on the behind. Listen to this, and then we'll break it down.
Start with Trump's use of the word vermin. Am I wrong to make the historical comparison to anti-Semitic propaganda during the Nazi years?
No, I mean, this is straight. It doesn't echo Mein Kampf. This is textbook Mein Kampf, except for the explicit mentioning of Jews as behind the left. Any anti-Semite will hear this vocabulary as directed against Jews. But Hitler himself was an anti-Semite. He took it that Jews were behind the international left, Marxism, communism, but his real target was democracy. And anyone who was pro-democracy or labor union, trade unionists, he labeled as Marxists. So this overbroad use of Marxist to target basically any political opponent, this is familiar from fascism and the way you attack democracy. And of course, labeling your political opponents vermin. The Nazis targeted their political opponents. They targeted for incarceration and concentration camps. They targeted suspected communists, socialists as internal enemies. So this is right out of Mein Kampf.
Place them in detention camps. He'd also re-implement his so-called Muslim ban. Use Title 42 to turn away asylum seekers, speed up mass deportations. Trump is also saying he'd indict his political opponents if he's reelected. What's your reaction when you hear this kind of stuff about what Trump would do in a second term?
Trump sees immigration, Jim, as his abortion, in the sense that this is something that he believes can appeal to his base and beyond. Biden's kindness has had a toxic impact. It has had exactly the opposite to the intended impact. It's been a welcome mat, and as a result, the southern border has been overrun and has given Trump and the Republicans an issue to run on.
But Geraldo, detention camps.
I believe that with
do you think
Stephen
he would do
Miller
that? You think he's
charge,
serious?
Dr. Evil in charge, I believe he is serious. I believe that in his mind, he sees a very simplistic answer to this problem, brutality. He will deport. He will hold as many as he can, deport as many as he can, as fast as he can. He'll undo the dreamers. He'll make the dreamers into nightmares. He will scare the bejesus out of potential immigrants, and I think it will have a positive impact on the southern border. However cruel he is, the more cruel he is, I think the lower illegal immigration will be. It is sad to say that. I hate that there is a cause and effect. But Trump's tough guy demeanor last time around, even threatening the president of Mexico with cutting off trade and all the other draconian threats he made, had a result to reduce undocumented immigration. He will be cruel. He doesn't care. And the sad thing is, it will appeal to his base in ways that I think will be very disappointing to those of us who want a pluralistic, inclusive society.
But Geraldo, is that smart politics for the former president? We've seen him do this before, demonize immigrants in a way that really alienates independent voters, female voters in swing districts, swing states, and so on. And as we're seeing polls showing Trump making inroads in the Latino community, this doesn't sound like very smart politics, I think, to a lot of folks.
I don't think the Latino community is monolithic. There are many in South Texas and Florida and so forth that have become, middle class and deplore the disorder. Now, I'm not speaking for myself. I am saying that I know for a fact that in New York, in Chicago, in many northern cities that have received busloads of undocumented immigrants, there is real bitterness toward the immigrants. They vagrant and on the sidewalks and disrupting lifestyles and so on and so forth. I am a big believer in immigration. I think the United States is stronger as a result of our immigrants, but I do believe that there is now some real disquiet. There is now some real unease about the anarchy that that unbridled immigration has brought, and I think Trump senses that. He's like a dog after red meat. He will take that issue. Putting Stephen Miller in charge is the signal. He's put Dr. Evil in charge of his immigration policy. You will see the camps, and the crackdown will be so draconian that it will ultimately, I believe, rebound against Trump and may work against him. But as of right now, he's smart to use it. He's scared to death about the abortion issue, but he's reveling in the fact that the rivals, the 5 rivals that he has left in the game, are not making a dent in his overwhelming lead, and his lead also over Joe Biden in the swing states, as you know, Jim.
Yeah. All right. Geraldo, I knew it would be a lively discussion. Great to see you as always. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
You have thought a lot about Donald Trump, and you have studied him a lot. You've been so involved in holding him accountable. When he said this week, if they're beating me, go down and indict them, and some of the pronouncements he's made over the weekend, I've heard that as kind of his authoritarian impulses getting worse. How do you hear them?
Well, the role of the government, in his view, is to advance his political fortunes and destroy his political enemies. So what would a second term look like? It would look a lot like Vladimir Putin in Russia. It would look a lot like Viktor Orban in Hungary. Illiberal democracy, meaning democracy without rights or liberties or respect for the due process system, the rule of law. And in fact, there's not much democracy left to it because their position is that they don't accept the integrity of any election where they lose. And that is a hallmark of an authoritarian party. They don't accept elections that don't go their ways. They refuse to disavow political violence. They embrace political violence as an instrument for obtaining power. And then everything flows from the will of a charismatic politician, and that is Donald Trump in their book. So we're clearly headed into a completely different form of government than any of us would recognize as continuous with the past. Right-wing authoritarian government in league with Putin, Xi, Orban, Bolsonaro.
Putin and Xi and Orban, and those are some serious authoritarian dictators out there. But they're people, it sounds like you're saying people should look at if they're wondering what a second Trump term would look like.
Those are the people that Donald Trump and his family do business with. Remember, his son-in-law brought back $2 billion from Saudi Arabia, from Mohammed bin Salman. He pocketed that after 4 years of rendering favors to Saudi Arabia, including covering up the assassination, dismemberment, drawing and quartering of a Saudi American journalist for the Washington Post, and rendering all kinds of favors to Saudi Arabia. Well, multiply that times every authoritarian despot on earth, and that's what we're getting with Donald Trump, because they've made relationships with every autocratic, plutocratic, kleptocratic regime on earth. And they don't pretend to have any program for the American people. It's just about restoring Donald Trump to power. They literally didn't have a platform that they adopted last time around, which tells you what? Their platform is whatever Donald Trump dictates to them on any particular day. And we see our colleagues in Congress just taking orders from Donald Trump on everything from shutting down the government to impeaching Joe Biden for nothing.
I did want to ask you about one of the specific things. There was some reporting over this weekend in the New York Times about his immigration plans. And none of this is really surprising given what he's done in the past, but it described it as preparing to round up undocumented people already in the United States on a vast scale and detain them in sprawling camps while they wait to be expelled. I mean, there are a lot of things in history that reminds me of. What did you think of when you read that story?
Well, of course, there's been an anti-immigrant impulse in America going back to the beginning with the Alien and Sedition Acts and the attempts to politicize and demonize foreigners to the country. Of course, the rounding up of Japanese Americans during World War II. So he wants to pick up on that strain, and that is a purely authoritarian program. I mean,
well, it was the result of having multiple pastors tell me essentially the same story about quoting the Sermon on the Mount parenthetically in their preaching. Turn the other cheek. To have someone come up after and say, where did you get those liberal talking points? And what was alarming to me is that in most of these scenarios, when the pastor would say, I'm literally quoting Jesus Christ, the response would not be, I apologize. The response would be, yes, but that doesn't work anymore. That's weak. And when we get to the point where the teachings of Jesus himself are seen as subversive to us, then we're in a crisis.
So you can see that across the political spectrum, right? You have former friends of Trump. I don't even know if Geraldo sees himself as a friend of Trump anymore, but they used to literally be friends. I know it's shocking that Trump would have a friend, but they knew each other for a very long time. And I'm not going to defend Trump's friends because it's like, how could you be a friend with this guy? Even before he was in politics, he was an absolute ghoul, just on a personal relationship, ideology aside. Just, he seems like an awful man to be around. But it's important to hear that. His hateful rhetoric, and Jamie Raskin bringing it up too, and experts who understand the history are making the connection. And remember, all of this is based on religion too. Can't ignore religion here. Remember how Donald Trump never was a real Christian. Never. Couldn't quote a Bible passage. His family's got no real history of being religious prior to their entrance in politics. At least on his side of the family, at least with him. And then all of a sudden, you have him and his son and other people saying, screw turn the other cheek, say screw welcoming in the immigrant, the poor, the huddled masses, but rather we need to be harsh and vicious and mean, everything that Jesus wasn't. And now there starts to be some pushback, and it's good to see. One thing that needs to happen more than anything else is conservative Christians need to realize that there is no bigger threat to their survival than Donald Trump, long term. They might think he's good now. He got them their stupid anti-choice legislation. But if they want to survive as anything else other than a hate movement, other pastors need to give him the boot too.
Believe he's barred from serving again based on language in the U.S. Constitution. They say the 14th Amendment's disqualification clause expressly forbids anyone from serving who's engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the government.
There's a new legal theory gaining some traction against Donald Trump and how his actions in regard to January 6th could actually keep him off the 2024 presidential ballot. And let me be clear, it's not just left-wing scholars who are making this argument. There are conservative scholars making this argument as well, which makes this whole situation even more fascinating. So what they're referencing is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, also known as the disqualification clause. And that actually was a part of the Constitution, or was an amendment in the Constitution in response to the Confederacy, and essentially an effort to prevent a member of the Confederacy from running for public office for President of the United States. So here's the exact language of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. So that last part is definitely important. If this type of argument ends up working, if it stands, Congress could overturn it through a 2/3 vote, which is honestly nearly impossible in today's political climate. But nonetheless, Cenk, what do you think about this legal theory?
So look, first of all, it's super interesting that conservatives are bringing it forward. It was two Federalist Society lawyers that originally brought it forward, and then it's a celebrated conservative and a celebrated liberal law professors that then made a giant op-ed out of it, et cetera. So, but in terms of the actual theory itself, it's actually rock solid. That doesn't mean it's going to win, but here's why it's rock solid. Several people have literally been convicted of insurrection. Stuart Rhodes, some of the Proud Boys. So those guys did an insurrection according to the courts and according to a jury. They were convicted. Did Trump aid and abet them by, for example, saying Proud Boys stand by during the national debates? You can make that argument. Did he aid and abet them in different ways? So for example, not telling them to stop because according to witnesses, Trump said he enjoyed what they were doing. Did he aid and abet them in other ways? So, and second of all, it turns out this January 6th was an insurrection and it has been legally adjudicated to be an insurrection. Who led the insurrection? Was it Stuart Rhodes, Rando Bob, Walter Mondale? No, it was obviously Donald Trump. So the reason they had this in here is because they didn't want the Confederate traitors to come back in and take over the government. Well, I don't want this traitor who did this insurrection to come back and take over the government because he doesn't believe in the American government. He doesn't believe in democracy. It makes perfect sense to apply this. To me, that isn't the question. The question is the politics of it. So it can make all the sense in the world, but if for whatever reason the groupthink of the establishment goes, oh no, I don't think you could do that, then they won't. But right now it started on a good footing because it's right-wingers that are bringing it up within the establishment. So people are taking it seriously. If progressives have brought it up, no one would take it seriously. So that's a positive step forward. Would the Republicans lose it?
Yes.
Yes, they would. I mean, they would go apoplectic if he was disqualified. So, and I will tell you this, there's one thing the conservatives are right about. You cannot do this state by state. If you do it, because technically, you can call for different states to disqualify him, but then we're gonna have a hot mess on our hands. Remember, shoe always on the other foot. Republicans will turn around and go, I don't like the Bernie's hair. He's disqualified. I think he's an insurrectionist because he's a commie Marxist, okay?
Yeah.
And then we're gonna have a mess, we can't do that.
So yeah, I mean, there are a few states that are already looking into this, including New Hampshire, Arizona, and Michigan. Look, there is the legal argument and what the Constitution entails, and then you're right, there's the politics of it and what the consequences of actually moving forward with this legal argument would be, right? I think the consequences might outweigh allowing him to just run for president. If you
I hear you, but I do, but I thought about that too, Anna, as I was considering this, and then I ultimately decided against it. Why? So again, I want to say the right-wingers are right. We can't have Hawaii and Vermont disqualify Trump and then he can't be president, whatever, right? We can't, but more importantly, swing states like Minnesota's largely Democratic, but he could theoretically win Minnesota if they disqualify him. That's terribly unfair, right? So you've got to either do it at the national level or not. Now, having said that, why do I think it makes sense? Well, I mean, what did Hitler do? Okay, so it's a Hitler analogy, everybody panic. Okay, fine, but I'm just saying, he tried to subvert democracy in Germany, and then they didn't stop him enough. They didn't forbid him from running again, and because they thought they were being fair. But did he believe in democracy? Of course not. He wanted to destroy democracy, and he had already shown it. So they should have disqualified him from running. And Trump already did a goddamn rebellion against America. He said, I don't care that I lost. There's witnesses that say he knows he freaking lost. Of course he lost. And I don't care if he's so painfully stupid that he doesn't understand that he lost, but he definitely did. He doesn't have any goddamn evidence at all. And then he says, who cares? He doesn't stop the riots. He lets them go for 3-4 hours. He says he doesn't mind that his vice president might have been murdered. Jesus, this guy's a despicable fascist, an actual fascist. So should we go, well, let's be fair to the Republicans and let them run because they might have their feelings hurt. I considered it because I know how angry they're gonna be. They're gonna be super angry, right? But no, don't let fascists run in a democracy because they don't believe in a democracy. But it doesn't go based on, hey, someone online called him a fascist. No, did you do an insurrection against the United States of America? It has already been adjudicated as an insurrection. So who led it?
Right. So look, for me, it's not about like, oh, Republican voters are going to be upset by it. I think we're headed closer and closer to actual violence, and with some, honestly, I hear conservative hosts on conservative shows fanning the flames of civil war, all of that stuff. That concerns me more, right? Like the political fallout and what it could potentially lead to in the country is what concerns me more than just simply hurting people's feelings by disqualifying Donald Trump through this specific section of the Constitution.
So yes and no. On the one hand, them threatening civil war is giving in to the Gestapo, saying, hey, we're gonna kill you guys if you don't agree with us. So make sure you let our fascist leader run again. Well, hey, brother, you gotta do what you gotta do and we gotta do what we gotta do. Okay, so I'm not moved by that. But I am like, one of the things that pisses me off about the establishment and the Democrats, so the Democrats never admit that there is an establishment and that people don't like it and that it is biased, okay? We're unique in that we say that and we say Trump is bad because both of those things are true. How is it relevant here? If you're gonna use the 14th Amendment, why didn't you start 2.5 years ago? And I'll tell you why they didn't start 2.5 years ago, for the same exact reason that none of these trials started 2.5 years ago. Because the establishment didn't want to use any of these things against another elite, against a president, right, a former president. But they thought that in their infinite stupidity that Trump wouldn't run again, or that the Republican voters would realize how radical he is, and golly gee, they would go with a corporate Republican, right? Well, you were all dumb, you were all wrong, as you always are in Washington. And then you waited and waited and waited, and now it looks like he's gonna win the Republican primary, and now you're panicked and going to the 14th Amendment. And so it looks biased. When you had a perfectly good case, you should have pursued right from the get-go. But you didn't pursue it when he did the insurrection, you're pursuing it when he's running for office. So that's what enrages the right, and the timing is political. But he did do it. Both of those things are true, and we can't get either side to acknowledge things that are obviously true.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.
Carol, let me start with you and just set the stage because you have some news that you just reported out moments ago, which is basically that the president's top advisor in the Middle East is heading to Israel. What do you know?
Well, that's right, Kristen. Brett McGurk, the president's top Middle East advisor,